All right, we are recording. So yeah, thanks everybody for making time. Hopefully you've had a chance to at least glance at the file I sent out, which is now showing on the screen. I think today, I'd like to just get feedback, see if there's anything I missed in the table is the big and maybe even just bigger picture. I've gotten down into the weeds a little bit, but hoping maybe I could get some feedback even on the bigger picture of how things are structured from everybody. And I'm due to meet, head out to Waco in about 3 weeks, basically. So yeah, we're hoping to test out really some on-the-ground case study kind of data collection. So there are really two aspects to it. Obviously, all the secondary data, which you can see in the table that's on the screen, and then the primary data collection on the ground. We just want to test it out in a couple of positive deviant counties in Texas, and I'd like to get to at least one, maybe two low negative deviants, if you want to call them that, in Texas as well. It's going to be pretty tight, but so I guess first of all, maybe comments on the data set that I put together and what you guys think. The structure is, as I started looking at it, there are different, quote unquote environments, trying to follow along with Salas's work, including the transportation environment, which you see in that first row, sort of social and cultural variables, some recreation, workplace, school, and natural environment data that are out there. Again, county level stuff. So do you guys want to pick through this or just comment on higher level?
Hey, this is Jeff Christian. I had a chance to look quickly, and I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to go through it a little bit more thoroughly. But I think I shot you a quick email. Did you? And I want to say we might have talked about this on the last call, but have you considered adding in some other pre-existing built environment variables?
Yeah, I think the hardest part, I know you've sent me like walkability index, and I was looking at that.
Yeah, I think several months ago, I think I sent you the smart location database stuff, and then I think just a couple days ago, I sent the walkability index, which is derived from the smart location database. But that's it could add a layer of complexity to your analyses that you don't need. From a labor standpoint, but I think the other side is, it's I would say an objective measure, or I guess it's not dependent on people's perceptions of the environment, and it's available nationwide, even in rural counties. But it's at the block group level, and so it presents you with an interesting question about how do you create a meaningful county level variable from those data, and I think that's probably I would guess that would be the biggest hurdle to using it, but I don't know, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I was looking at it again yesterday, I think, and today, and I don't know if I think I looked at a few places, including my own, where I live, and I thought I saw some missing variables.
Yeah,
doesn't mean that doesn't stop us from adding some more in there. And obviously, some of that comes from the existing research. So the debate I'm having is whether to use that or just approach it in a really exploratory way and just see what's going on. But yeah, you're right. It would just mean aggregating it up somehow.
Yeah. I think it's tough to balance what you can and can't do from a effort, from a labor standpoint, and what would be maybe the most I don't know, interesting from an academic or other standpoint.
Mm-hmm. What I will, maybe what we could do is just maybe rip the variable list out of it and send it around and get comments. What we could get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or even, I was thinking if you use the prepackaged EPA walkability index, it would at least give you some indication about what's going on in the built environment in your county. So, my initial thought was if you look at of the block groups that are contained within or touch a part of of that particular county, what proportion of those are in, I don't know, the top half of walkable block groups in the United States or something along those lines. So is it, are the rural counties where physical activity is more common, are they different on the ground from a built environment standpoint? And I can't think of a data set that would be better
Mm-hmm.
able to do that off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other thoughts about that? I mean, obviously I like the idea, and it's just, you're right. It's now how to aggregate it.
Yep.
Because there's a measure of, I mean, essentially the block group will be about how many people are in that area too. It's like how many people are covered by a walkable area within a county or something.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of a tough nut to crack, because a rural county in Texas is huge, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's the size, some of them are the size of Rhode Island, but they might only have a few block groups in them because the population's so low.
Yeah.
And so if you had if 90% of the county population is in the county seat, then they might actually all live in a pretty walkable area.
Right.
So that does add another layer of complexity. You're right.
Yeah. So I think I'd have to send that around and just identify what people think.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry, who's trying?
Well, no, I was just going to say, and I'm certainly not, I wouldn't want to hold up the project because of my interest in using that. So.
Mm-hmm. No, it's okay. I mean, it's an important, because that score or that index basically summarizes a whole boatload of variables, right?
Yeah, it's not that many actually. EPA's index is pretty simple. I want to say it's 4 variables from the Smart Location database.
Okay. Yeah, and you know what I do have in there as well, like the percentage of people that are in a place. And I was looking at some of the CBS publications, and the way urban and rural was classified is basically percent of people in a municipality that are in an urban area or something. So
yeah. Is that percent of people that are in a place that you have listed, is that just they live in a census designated place? Is that
right.
What that means? Okay. So that would account for the scenario that I just mentioned, like in rural Texas, where 90% of the population of a rural county lives in the county seat.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I'll send out that question to the group of how, and again, it's all, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say we're winging it, but it's, we're trying to figure out what works and what we have access to. So
yeah.
At this point, it seems like a pretty good set of data all matched up by the FIPS code for the county. So.
Mm-hmm. I also think that indicator that the percent of 5 to 9 year olds within a half mile of public elementary schools, that's going to give you, I think, a similar indication of the concentration of population in small towns.
Yeah.
I think that's a good proxy for a lot of it. I think arguably that's a proxy measure for a lot of different things, like population density often is.
Right. And, a lot of these variables are going to be highly correlated. So we're going to have to get a pretty sophisticated statistician at some point. if we're trying to run things. So
Yep.
lots of multi-collinearity.
Possibilities, that's right.
Megan, what's multi-collinearity? No. I like doing that.
I do have, sir.
Go ahead.
I do have a question. You guys, it seems so far, are focusing on people doing activity within their own community. Have you considered people who are, because I saw that you had people scoped out into different groups of how far away they work from where they live.
Mm-hmm.
Have you taken into consideration these people who driving to these larger cities to work are going to gyms in the towns where they work? Maybe that's why they're more active.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Could work a couple different ways, right? And if people have longer commutes, they might have less time to be active, or they could have access to greater things at work and then go back home. You're absolutely right. So I don't know how we would.
Well, and the only reason I can bring that up is because I know my mom, she's tried to get into a regular habit of exercising, and it's really hard around where we live, but there are tons of gyms around her because she has to drive 30 minutes to work every day, and there are tons of gyms that she could be a part of.
Yep.
Kind of where that comes into.
Yeah, that's a good point, but I think that's probably captured, and it kind of depends on how the physical activity is assessed. So the way that the county level physical activity is usually based on the person's residence, right? Christian, refresh my memory as to where the county level physical activity variable is coming from?
It's BRFSS.
Yeah, that's right. So it's based on their home address. So, and the way the question is phrased is it's going to be irrespective of where the activity takes place. It's just where they live and how much physical activity they do. So I think it's definitely a valid concern, but I think it's actually accounted for in the way that the physical activity is assessed in BRFSS.
Yeah, and that would be something that, like you're pointing out in a conversation, it'll probably come out in conversations on the ground. It's like, we don't have stuff here, but it's a bedroom community, and a lot of people go to work and then they exercise at work and then come home. We don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Hi, Renee.
Hi. Sorry for being slightly late.
That's all right. Michael, do you have any thoughts about some of the variables, that might apply to your field a little more? Or?
Wow, I think there's a lot here already. And I think you've covered most of the major things that we would think about. I mean, density would be the obvious one.
Yeah.
One thing I didn't see anywhere is tree cover. I don't know how much that really needs to be added, but it certainly, is a factor in people exercising, depending on how much there is. The other thing that I just sort of been wondering about is, have you thought about, or do you think it would be valuable to look at some of this stuff in GIS and start to map some things and try to kind of understand the physical environment that way?
I would love to. How are you? No.
Well, I'm not very good, but I have some colleagues that are.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I think maybe it would just be interesting to explore a little bit if we could take some of these counties that you were thinking about looking at and just kind of dig a little bit and see what information is there.
Yeah. I mean, one thing, I can do a very crude maps of the data, just either through Community Commons or Tableau, real basic stuff, but not at the complex level that you're talking about, probably. Where, you bring up a good point about tree cover. Is there a data set that has that, like county level? What's the kind of variable, the percentage of? Could you explain a little bit more?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd have to dig some and try to look at it. I know it's something people have done before, but off the top of my head, I'm not sure how exactly we would do that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that the National Land Cover Database has that at a pretty fine scale, like I think down to the meter or 4 meter resolution or something like that.
Holy smokes! All right.
But it's been a long time since I've looked into that, though. I know that I reviewed a paper for one of our former interns who went to EPA, and that was one of her first papers at EPA was fine resolution tree cover. I'm sure I still have that paper somewhere. If I find the data set, I can give it to you.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, so essentially it's like a county level percentage of land area with tree cover.
That would probably be the variable that you would but you would definitely need a GIS person to create a county aggregated value for that.
Okay. Okay. So we have, I mean, I view this just like packing a suitcase for a long trip. Just throw a bunch in, take some out, and be left with what's valuable. So I think the next piece is kind of thinking about the case study. I was talking to one of our qualitative experts here, and I was describing the project, and she said, yeah, it sounds like you're doing a case study to try to find best practices, get those out to other rural areas. So on screen, hopefully you can see the big areas, the high level, the ways of collecting data. I think there's a lot we could do up front. So item 2 is kind of document review. And I think the purpose of this trip to Texas is to really figure out, what is feasible and what is useful. So again, I'm trying to keep as much of a childlike mind as possible with not throwing on there, just thinking about zoning codes and planning and other things, just kind of letting people speak about what's working there. But I think it would be useful to do some document review to see what's going on. Are there physical activity groups? Are there people that keep popping up in the newspaper? And this is where, if we look at item 1, Renee, I know you were saying you have an extension agent friend or someone you work with that might be the key person, but I think just really working with that key person to get some of the, prep knowledge about who the key players are, who the health nuts are, or whatever it might be, just to figure out where to start, right?
Yeah. And I think that's a good idea, and and really just starting with the extension agents just because of having a connection already, but knowing that the way, at least in Texas, that looks is in each county, that person might actually have a different title or a different role. Mm-hmm. And so that person might be a person that does, I don't know, that could vary across the counties that we're talking with, but it should at least give us a point of perspective to reach out to additional, either who are these other people, but also just to reach out to other people in the community as well. And so I am waiting still to hear back on some of those. And there wasn't, just as I kind of threw all of the counties that we were talking about into that email like we had discussed. Mm-hmm. And Mike basically responded back and said that he doesn't know if he can get in connection with all of them, but feels pretty confident from about a 2/3 standpoint. I don't know exactly which ones that means, but I kind of said, hey, whatever sounds like a great starting point. Yeah. So, and I did include those extra ones that weren't on the original pairing list just to kind of see which ones come back. Okay.
Yeah, I think the semester is beating me up, and it's just stuff is beating us up, so we haven't really we're kind of hitting the moment where we got to finish, figure this out. So, yeah, you and I, maybe we could just hang out after we're done with this too, and try to talk a little bit more details on that.
Good.
So, yeah, obviously up front, ahead of time, getting a key informant, maybe building, getting that person to help build some key stakeholder group and get that group together in a focus group or a couple focus groups. And I keep talking about as people, places, or programs that support physical activity. You throw policies in there as well. But I'm wondering that would probably be focused. Yeah, I mean, people might be able to help out with that, but so key stakeholder group, that could be one or more focus groups in the local area. Could always supplement that with phone interviews because people are so busy, and my timeline, for the timeline for these visits is always pretty tight. So either follow up or pre-interviews by phone. And then honestly, what I would love to do is just do sort of woman or man on the street interviews and just start asking people. As creepy as that might be, I'll turn on my West Virginia accent. And what you doing here? What you doing here, boy?
Yeah.
But I think it's just I want to get a feel for the place and some experiential. Try to go for a walk or a run or ride a bike and see what goes on.
I think asking about the culture in the place too. I mean, if you see people out and about, asking what is it about. Is there a cultural component, or is there something about the people in this place that make them more likely to be physically active? I think that could be a really interesting question to ask of a local, or maybe it's maybe the place is important. Maybe it's a community that's entire economy revolves around a lake, and it's recreation and fishing and it kind of lends itself to an active lifestyle or something. I don't know. It's I really like the idea of getting out there, and just asking the man on the street.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just threw that. I mean, that's a good way of phrasing that question. What is it about this place that makes you active? Or yeah. And then we got to remember we'll be going to some places. We're going to try to keep it as neutral as possible, right? Makes you active or keeps you from being active. So.
Right. Yep.
Good point.
One other place that might be interesting to kind of look is, have you ever looked on Nike Plus at some of the run routes and stuff on there?
Oh yeah.
That's a good point. Also, Strava's global heat map can do the same thing as well.
Yeah, because I just pulled up Waco, and you can really start to kind of see where people are, using those things.
Cameron Park, right?
Yeah, and all around Baylor by the river there.
It's interesting, and I don't know how accessible this is, but I was just listening to a Texas Standard NPR thing yesterday, and the state of Texas just purchased Strava data for the last 2 years to use the bike planning. I don't know how accessible that is, but what I heard was that they're doing some training for different. I'm guessing they're all state employees, but that data might be available to some degree if we can figure out who to contact on that. Again, there are limitations with Strava only, but in thinking through that, there might be something that we could try to access from that standpoint.
Yeah, we did a little work with Strava at CDC, and I think one of our big conclusions, one of our biggest takeaways was that it's probably not real useful for measuring population participation in physical activity because it's such a select group of people that are contributing data, but because it's spatial, it's really good at identifying where people are physically active in a community. So it's really the places I think that shine through in Strava, just from my own personal opinion.
That's helpful.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm in Texas somewhere here. If you can. Oh my gosh, I lost it. Anyway.
Yeah, that's my opinion.
Yeah,
that's my. You're showing my old commute route right there. That's Austin and North Austin. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna have to learn Texas geography a little bit better. Anyway, all right.
Well, you see all the black areas? That's where we're going.
That's where we're going.
Yep.
All the fully black, very few blue lines.
So I think in rural West Virginia, I'd say, you on Strava? Like, what? What's Strava? Strava, what's that? Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Christian, do you have a question on there about influential people? What if there's
what people,
like Leo Manzano is from a small town outside Austin called Marble Falls, and he was a Olympic medalist. And I think running in Marble Falls is more popular now than it was before he became prominent.
Okay.
But it could be influential people. Yeah. Oh yeah. I see it now. Sorry.
Yep. So I'm trying to hit all the, I think conceptually, it's not just the different environments, but it's the people and the places and kind of like you said, the culture, the programs. Because I don't know, Renee and Megan, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like with the Play Street stuff, it's like people need permission now, or kids are so programmed now that you have to have a program to be allowed to go out and be active. I don't know.
I think that's definitely it. It actually always makes me think of something that Mike said, I don't know how many months ago, just about the idea of like this, we have these spaces, but they aren't being used. So do we need to actually add programming for those spaces to be activated in a better way? And I think we did see that, at least, especially up in Maryland. It was more of a, not as structured as some programming, but the idea of providing some sort of structure or programming to help places being used. And so I think it is super helpful to understand that. The other thing that's showing up in some of that work, first off, the Play Streets definitely are drawing lots of less resourced families with fewer resources, as they're free. But some of the other programming that exists is being referenced as being very expensive.
Okay.
And it might be helpful to understand the programming, but it also might be that programming accentuates divisions within the communities.
Sound good. Yeah, so I just added there sort of what programs for adults or kids are influential, what's the cost. Yeah. So these are, pretty broad. I wouldn't obviously go through every, there are 9 questions listed here that I'm highlighting, but that would be a long intercept interview. So I think I like the very first one, like you said, Jeff, what is it about this place? And then just probes for people, probe about, are there really influential people? Are there programs? Are the parks, good quality? I try to keep it as consistent as possible, but also, get a few follow-up items in for each.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Christian, this is a different type of methodology, but maybe there's a way to capture like little pieces of it by there's a consistent 1 or 2 questions, and then there's a random selection of what question the person gets next.
Okay.
Where they're still short, but you're getting some of these different perspectives, these different angles, having to ask all 9 questions of everybody.
Okay.
Something to consider. And there's negatives to that too, or limitations to that, but.
Okay, I like that. So maybe what I'll do is follow up with that list. So I'm going to essentially try to categorize some of these. Just do it something like that, like you see on the screen now. And and then maybe just get everybody's comments on how the list looks. So I think a nice, like, soft open, do a lot of people exercise or a lot of people active. That's a yes, no, just to start talking. And then what is it about the place? Could always start with a ranking, a rating of 1 to 10. That's usually an easy way to open. Right. But I think maybe I'll take your comments out of these 7. What would be like a mandatory question or 2? That would be good to have in all places. The people. Would it be people and programs?
Well, I always I have a one-track mind on the built environment, so I always go to places, you know.
Because we want to hit each level, if you think about it that way.
I mean, so maybe it is that there are key things of it's. I mean, so do a lot. What is it? And then like, what are who are the people that do it? Where is it happening? And are there programs that facilitate? And then, they're just after some of that. It's not going to be in depth, but you get those responses to where we have kind of these P's across. You get some of those different levels, like you're saying, Christian. Mm-hmm. And it still extends it, but as long as they aren't like, as long as they're directed more, we'll get some of that, and it still could move quickly in an intercept interview style.
Yeah.
And then maybe it's some of those random follow-ups that are going to take longer to respond. That kind of you get one of these, and we start getting at least pieces. We get some feedback on those, but it keeps the intercept interviews short.
Now,
and maybe those are some of the questions that we also repeat in the focus groups or the longer interviews, and to where we get some citizen feedback, but we also get it. We can just, I guess, go into more depth when we're talking with somebody at a longer length.
Okay. So, where would an intercept interview take place? Is it just people who are active, who are at a park or something, or would it be anybody just kind of hanging out at Walmart or at barbecue joint?
Send you to the bars or something.
I can do that.
I can do that. I would almost say not at a park.
Right.
I think I would say in the general, and maybe it's when driving through, seeing if there are actually people at parks, because you would want to capture some of those people that are there. But if it's a space that's not being used because that's where other interesting things are occurring, then we're not necessarily going to want to be there anyways. And then two, we're not going to see anybody else there. You know? And that's shown up in enough of my communities to where that wouldn't be necessarily the only place I would want to collect the information.
You get a good variety of people in Walmart.
Yep, you sure do. If there is a Walmart.
Mm-hmm.
Or just hang.
Or downtown on the square. I mean, or if you're saying like whether it's a barbecue joint or if there's a main street or wherever a central area is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you're in the county seat, you can find the courthouse square kind of space.
We'd have to be careful with that too, because my little town where I grew up, that's not where most of the people go.
Okay.
Is that right? Yeah.
Or you only go if you're in trouble?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's something that. Yeah, I mean, is it at schools? Is it around workplaces? I guess every place is a little bit different, but one of those you kind of know it by feel.
Maybe it's asking our point of contact for the community too, is where's a good place, and letting it be self-identified by somebody that's at least familiar with the community. And we can give some of these like suggested ideas in that conversation. And maybe that's a consistent way to approach it, is these are some options and getting some feedback in that initial conversation.
Yeah, cool. Good thinking. Okay. So like I said, I'll send out this list to the entire group and get comments on that, because I think that'll get us some nice information. Do we do some kind of observation or audit? I'm highlighting those now on screen.
I like the idea of the information collected in the RALA program and policy and townwide.
Yep.
I know you have a question mark by the street segment. I almost feel like so if there happens to be an area that has more walkable features like sidewalks or a walking trail, that might make sense to do. But like some of the things around looking at the quality of and the quantity of like what outdoor spaces for physical activity are available. So if there is a park, what's there? Like I think that type of information, whether it's using the PARA or something else, would be more useful just to know what is there. I mean, we won't know who's using it, but maybe we can ask that question in a focus group. It won't be the same as like a spaces or anything else, or so play or anything like that, but we would have at least an idea of what is there.
Okay. Yeah, and I know we've talked about this before. I just wanted to make sure we figure it out. And then the other is, yeah, go ahead.
Christian, I would just say, I think regarding the observation and audits, I would think really carefully about what you would hope to do with those data if you collect them, because that's going to, I mean, if you're trying to make some kind of a quantitative estimate of the environmental features in a county, then you would need some kind of sampling strategy for the counties, and then if you're only doing a couple of audits, then the information that you collect is so highly dependent on which particular points in the county you choose.
Right.
So, if it's to kind of get I don't know. I don't know if it's more just to get kind of a gestalt of the county seat or something like that, then maybe it's appropriate. But I would just think on it a little bit before committing to doing it.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily a street segment tool observation lover, so
yeah.
But I think I was looking just at a couple of the county seats in some of these counties, Renee, and what struck me is that the ones that are least active, the counties, had like a perfectly drawn rectangle or square for their municipal boundaries, according to Google. And then the others that were more active were much more nuanced and followed, just jagged, crazy lines. So I don't know what that means. Whether they're, I don't know what that means.
Maybe it's elevation and water.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. So it was just a strange observation in a small sample size. So, based on your experience, Renee, what do you think?
With which one?
For an observation or an audit tool.
I think what I like about the RALA, the two front-end parts, the program and policy assessment and the townwide assessments, is they aren't like what we traditionally think of in terms of audits. Because they're not the street segments, they're not the place assessments, and so I think they help gather some of the background information, and at least in asking and trying to obtain it in a systematic way across communities. We might need to look at how it's worded, because most of that has been worded to like working within one town within a county. So if we're thinking about truly county, we still might need to think about how do we get that more broadly than just the county seat or the main town that we're in.
Yeah.
So that would probably be something too. I think in terms of the other things, I agree, unless we really know what we want to do with some of the other information, and I don't know if we would want to make sure it was representative and systematically done. And I don't know, I guess I just don't know on that. I don't know if I think it could be useful. I think it sounds like a crazy undertaking if we're talking about an entire county. and how many things, at least in the rural counties that I've been in, when we've done some version of auditing, the things that you can't figure out until you're actually on the ground that they exist, like the random rodeo arena or something else that you just, I mean, for as much as you search online, you don't see it, and Google hasn't been updated, and it all of a sudden has appeared or whatever. And so that sounds like I don't know, that sounds stressful. But maybe that's something that, I mean, in some ways it'd be nice to know like what is available, but maybe that's something, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how you do that from a county level standpoint versus just the one town that we end up being in.
Yeah, I mean, and can the RALA, the townwide you were saying the townwide assessment needs some on the ground?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that was my thought. I mean, obviously the county seat, but sometimes, and again, I looked at a few counties, there's one other, pretty highly populated place oftentimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
and
maybe it's those
and
two places.
They're doing those two. And that might be the way that it's done, is if there are two, or I don't think that, I mean, some of these counties it's going to be one, but I think we'll be able to identify easily, and whether even doing some of those, I don't know if you have to be in person to necessarily do that if you're connected to somebody that can help respond to the information, because we've done some of the RALA townwide and program and policy pieces via phone in previous projects, just because they just were never in the office and we were in the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so maybe that is, as I scroll back up, item 4 under the case study, the phone interviews would be the RALA.
Or at least guided by, I mean, we might look at it, I mean, revisit each item that maybe there are some things that don't make sense to go to that level of detail on from that standpoint. So, I mean, they were also designed to where a community member could actually complete them. Mm-hmm. And the projects that I've used the RALA kind of done a back and forth, whether it was a researcher-led like interview with people doing them, or whether it was kind of passed off in terms of one person in the community that felt like they could get those responses. So, I mean, it might be just visiting back through those items.
Okay. All right. Okay. The other, and I explained some of my kind of thoughts about the Earth, looking on the Google map. Talked about some of my experiential, just try to go for a walk, a bike, or a run. And then, I threw in here a document review. And this could come out of the interviews. But, so there's just some ideas in there that, we could, and this is kind of I'm trying not to be urban biased, but here's some urban bias, right? Is there a comp plan? Is there a zoning ordinance? What's in it? Do they have a Main Street organization? To try.
I mean, we have seen some of the walking school bus stuff show up in rural communities, not as heavily, but I mean, some of the rails to trails things have shown up in rural communities. I don't know if we'll see those type of things, but or maybe even, is there even a Parks and Rec department?
Right.
I mean, there's some things that I think are similar categories that we just might need to be open to what the actual subcategory might be from that standpoint. And there might be snow removal policies, or at least salting for ice. The other thing might be, what do you do when all of your streets are cracking from the heat in the summer?
Yeah.
Some things that kind of, and the maintenance that falls under the heat side of things. Not that streets are the only places, but the shade cover, which I know is put more around the idea of trees earlier. I mean, the outdoor spaces definitely. I mean, it's just hot in the summertime. So.
Okay. Yeah. So hopefully it's exploratory enough that it yields, you know, that's going to be a challenge, I think, is just to not be too, you know, driven by what we know from a lot of the research already done in the more urban areas.
Mm-hmm.
But, as y'all reflect on this, are we missing anything?
Hi, this is Kate Joyce.
Hey, Kate.
With the Shawnee Senior Center. But our community is a new Blue Zone community.
Yeah.
And I apologize for coming so late into the meeting and just got hung up. But we have already implemented, and we're rural. Let me start by saying that Pottawatomie County, Oklahoma is a very rural county. We've already implemented walking school bus in Shawnee, which is about 35,000 people, but we've also implemented it in two of our more rural areas, the small town of McLeod and the small town of Asher. It's not something that happens every day yet, but each of the communities was very happy with the way that it went when it was in. They started on National Walk to School Day, and it worked out really well. We have a Rails and Trails program, and we are very lucky in that there is an existing railroad here in Shawnee that goes between Tulsa and Oklahoma City, and we are working to include passenger travel on that. Right now it's just product travel and produce. We have the walking moais that are happening all over our community. So we're already practicing some of this stuff. And my understanding from Blue Zones is that they have data that they are supposed to collect already. Have you guys visited with them about what they already collect so there's not a duplication of effort?
I haven't. I don't know if anybody else has. Who's running that?
Blue Zones.
It's the company?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if they are focused on what they have identified from the original Blue Zones.
They are the owner of the company is the Dan, whatever his name is.
Buechner.
Buechner, thank you.
Yep.
That went out and researched the Blue Zones. So that is the original company.
Yeah.
Health is the name of the organization that puts the Blue Zones together throughout the community, the states.
Yeah, and to be very honest, I mean, we are doing something. This idea is very similar, obviously. I mean, it's even in the title. So,
yeah,
but it's very much focused on one single behavior, which is, you know, a little bit different than the Blue Zones, which is, well, at least originally was about, you know, people living high rates of people living over 100. So
what is the single behavior that you guys are focusing on?
Just the physical activity. So the key outcome is the physical activity you know, the prevalence or the percentage of people meeting physical activity guidelines at a county level. So it's
and
very
tracking.
Go ahead. Sorry, Kate.
I'm sorry. This is you're putting together the tool for tracking and implementing that data and that project?
No, so essentially we're using existing data to identify the places and then going to the places and trying to do, you know, look at other data that already exists for those places to see if they're different, the ones that are really active and the ones that are really inactive. And then, but only in the most rural counties. And then going to those most active places, just like the Blue Zones, and doing a lot of on-the-ground qualitative work.
Our kickoff was August 26th, so we are very new, and we have not made it to certification yet. Healthways has come in, and they've been contracted to work with our community for 3 years. And the goal is to get us to be a certified blue zone community within that time frame.
Okay, very good. Yeah, very similar approach, but just a different outcome of focus. So very good. So I want to be sensitive to time. I want to try to wrap up by on the hour here, top of the hour, so or bottom of the hour. I don't know. Are there any other thoughts about the methods as described? And everybody has access to the document, hopefully, and can just throw comments on it if you think of anything. But is there anything we're missing?
Hey, Christian, Jeff again. I did a little digging before the call on the CBOS data.
Yeah.
To look at some of the different rural communities that were involved. And if I'm reading the methods report correctly, we have a total of 688 respondents in rural, so 688 cities or towns in rural areas responded to CBOS. So, whether or not any of those 688 are in the counties that you've identified remains to be seen, but there is at least, I was actually fairly pleasantly surprised by seeing 688 in rural counties. So, look, I'm going to dig on my end and see what would be involved in identifying cities that overlap with your counties.
Okay.
And I can get back to you as soon as I hear something.
Sounds good. And when Renee and I identify the specific counties, then in Texas at least, I mean, we can just start there to keep it narrow.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I think that's also helpful in thinking of kind of the next phase, right, too, is even if they don't have overlap for our pilot, that might actually, hopefully there will be, but that's something that can be integrated when we kind of look at the next step too.
Yeah. And if nothing else, you've got a previously pilot tested data collection instrument for policies and
absolutely.
At the city level.
Yeah,
and maybe that's something too, just to visit with on the front end too. And maybe Christian, you've already looked at that, but I haven't looked at that.
Yeah, I was looking at the tool earlier. I mean, that would be essentially the Rolla. It would kind of overlap with Rolla probably. I'd have to look at them side by side, but
yeah, I'm not familiar enough with Rolla to say how much they overlap.
Well, maybe that's at least a starting point for us when we think about what to collect and how to collect it, is seeing, since that does already exist for other communities, do we build off of it as our base so that we have some of that overlap?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just thought.
I think it would be good to, since it's been filled out by so many different places, it'd be good to compare. Good for comparison purposes. So.
Maybe that's a good point. Start there, and then if there's things on the Rolla that we think the CBOS doesn't capture, then maybe that's kind of the point of consideration.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to look at them side by side, I think.
I would too.
Okay. So we are just about at 3:00 my time here. So again, everybody has a link to this document and can comment on it. Welcome comments. I've already added a few things based on our call. Hopefully, hopefully that this helps out. I think it was good to talk through this a little bit. And then Renee, you and I have to talk about what I'm doing when I'm in Texas.
Yes.
But I might not be able to do that now. I got to get home for the school bus soon. So.
I hear you. I've got to go to a promotion and tenure presentation.
Bah humbug.
Bah humbug. But yours sounds way more fun. It's getting home to your kiddos.
Yep.
But yeah, let's visit. Let's find a time in the very near future. So send me when you're available, when you get a chance, after you settle in.
Okay. Any other follow-up items? Any other to-do items? Just see how this thing works.
Thanks, Christian. It looks, I know it's not fully solidified, but it's coming together really nicely. I think it's going to provide some useful information.
Yeah, thanks. It's better than just having a blank sheet of paper and just going to a place and asking stuff.
It could be a true ethnography. We could do it.
I asked somebody about ethnography. They're like, "You going to go stay in Texas for 6 months?" I was like, "No." No, I'm not going to do that and become immersed in the culture.
You know what? At least do it during the winter.
That's right.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you all for making time, and we'll see how this thing works. I've got to assume our next call, our next group gathering will be in December, since in about a month I'll be in Texas.
That sounds great.
All right. And I believe Baylor. I think we have Baylor and Texas in the next two games for WVU. So.
Yeah, so do we actually. Well, we've got Oklahoma State and then Baylor and then West Virginia.
Yeah, 2 easy
I'm
wins.
guessing that y'all will all have a win coming up shortly, but you might put up.
Easy wins for WVU. All right.
I don't know.
Thank y'all.
All right, guys. Thank you all so much.